Hi guys, today is going to be a bit of a follow-up video regarding my last video where Kai Greene confirmed that he's not going to be participating in the 2015 Mr. Olympia, and some more information has come out, some things have been confirmed. We still don't know 100% all the details of everything that went down, but Kai has explained a lot more of what was going on. We do have a little bit more information from the IFBB and AMI, and everyone's kind of come together where we'll never get the whole story about the behind-the-scenes thing. Obviously, there's too much going on with money and politics and personal decisions on Kai's part, but we have a much clearer picture now than we did when it was initially confirmed that he wasn't going to be in the Olympia in that very emotional video he put out. And part of it came together where the NPC judge, Lee Thompson, announced that he is going to be the head and the sort of the foundation of a new bodybuilding organization, and that in itself brought to light a lot of things regarding Kai's decisions, what was going on behind the scenes. For those of you who haven't really caught up with things over the past week, or just now getting into Olympia as the press conference just ended about an hour ago from the time that I'm filming this, and prejudging doesn't start until tomorrow, Kai is out of the Olympia and is a mixture of his own choices and what the IFBB pushed him to do, and different aspects with AMI. There were issues where Kai left Muscle Meds and started his own supplement line, Dynamic Muscle, and in doing so he was then trying to get, with Dynamic Muscle, a booth space and all these different things to promote and launch his supplement line at the Olympia, kind of the way Dana Lynn Bailey is promoting and launching her new supplement line at the Olympia and has a booth there. And it's a really big boost for a new supplement, obviously. I mean, being at the biggest bodybuilding show in the world and launching your line is a great thing. But there were conflicting issues where it sounds like Dynamic wanted special treatment in a way. They wanted fees waived, they wanted free booth space, they wanted this and that, and those who were in control of the marketplace were refusing to do that, and rightfully so, but it was kind of a back and forth and a tussle. It was really a typical thing that happens where you try to get the best deal, but at the same time, if you are in control of where those booths are going to be, if you're in control of the expo space, you want people to pay their dues, rightfully to pay their dues. And what happened though was Kai's participation in the Olympia kind of got tied into all of that, where it was almost used as a persuasion, used as a card where, well, I'm not participating if we don't get this deal. And it was not really a good move. You know, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. It was definitely a dangerous game, and initially things, I think, in Kai's mind were going to eventually work out. Something was going to happen, but what happened was nobody backed down on the expo side, and Dynamic Muscle did not get a booth space. They are blacklisted from the event, and there are other issues where it really ticked off those in the IFBB itself, Steve Weinberger and everyone, and they weren't directly opposing Kai coming into the Olympia, but there was a definite trying to suppress Dynamic's launch, trying to make sure other bodybuilding magazines and things aren't going to be promoting it, really pushing for kind of almost punitive measures. You don't try and pull that with us again. Don't try to wield this might. And in a way, it's sensible in the fact that they don't want other athletes, big stars, to come in and think they can get preferential treatment. And I understand that, but they took it a little too far. And the interesting thing was, though, today Kai announced that Bodybuilding.com was going to start selling and started a partnership with them for Dynamic. And that's really interesting because Bodybuilding.com lost the ability to live stream the Olympia because the IFBB wanted 3 times the normal amount to have the rights to live stream it, and it went to Amazon now. And I think there is a little bit of bad blood there, and I think it's kind of a little bit of a middle finger that, well, we're going to support this supplement line because we don't care that the IFBB has this big ego. It's definitely a boys' club. It is unfair. A lot of things are rigged within competitions. It's more about who you know and are you an image they like versus are you actually the best person on stage that day. It comes down to a lot of people where if you're only a point or two away from being number 1 or number 2, but they like the other guy who's like right neck and neck with you more than you, as their image as someone who can be sort of a puppet for them, they're going to give that person the win, even if you're pretty even. That'll be the thing that will push them overboard. It's a big reason why when you have a Mr. Olympia, there tends to be this long reign of years, unless they really screw up or their bodies kind of give out after just years and years of pushing, because in a way they want to build that as a face of the brand, and they want it to be someone who, again, can be almost like a puppet figure in front of them. But the problem is it's gotten worse and worse over the years, and it's turned into a thing where Phil Heath, I think, is not a bad guy and is not a bad competitor, but he is in many ways a walking stereotype of what people think a bodybuilder is, and he is someone who seems very close-minded and seems to be not a fair competitor, constantly stepping over the line. I mean, definitely one of the top guys physique-wise, definitely someone who doesn't seem to be, an outright jerk, obviously. I mean, you can't know someone personally like that, but definitely seems to be someone who takes advantage of the situation when he can, and really just wants to be, a kiss ass, really, wants to be a brown noser, wants to be in that boys club, and because he sees what's happening with someone like Kai, who's not part of the boys club, who is getting basically punished for being different, being someone who is artistic, being someone who is thoughtful, and being someone who people can really relate to in a different way than just, that's a body type I want to be, someone who they can relate to a little bit more intellectually, and he attracts a different crowd. He attracts people that wouldn't normally be bodybuilding fans simply through things like his seminars, his TV appearances, and he's been, over this past year, far more active in those avenues than even Mr. Olympia, Phil Heath. And you had all those issues going on with dynamic muscle, and on top of that, Kai, I think, in a way, up to a point, knew he probably was not going to compete. I think he was still hoping, and up till the end, what happened where in the video he was talking about, he's been working towards this goal for 20 years and it's unfair, and then he paused and said, no, it is fair, because they were pushing him out, they want Kai gone, but at the same time, he still could have signed the contract and participated in the Olympia and participated in the sham, but the thing is, that's really what it would be. It would be Kai admitting that, I'm never going to win because they won't let me. The best they'll let me get is second place, whether I look the best or not. But he wasn't going to do that. He's taking a risk, and he is pulling back, and he pulled back from the Olympia, and he really still showed, like in this picture here, that he was in shape. He was ready to fight for first place. He was someone who, looking here, I really think he was a guaranteed top 3 and could possibly have, maintained that top 2 and probably looked like number 1 but not gotten it. And it seems like it's something where it was Kai's decision, and it's not how he wanted things to go. It's moving away. It's not giving up on his dream, but changing his dream because it's not what he thought it was going to be. The IFBB is not what it used to be. It is, there's always corruption in every organization, in every sport, but it's gotten to like FIFA levels. It's really, really bad. And even Arnold was speaking out against it at the Arnold Classic, talking about how the judging has gone crazy, and it's too much of a boys' club. And there's this talk over the past year or so about trying to get a return to that classic physique and trying to have more transparency in the organization, but it hasn't been happening. And that brings me to the announcement of this new bodybuilding organization. Now, people have tried this in the past to come up with a new organization to challenge the IFBB, and it's always failed, but I think this time there is actually a chance that it could be successful because, as a whole, many athletes and fans are sick of the way the IFBB has been running, and it's gotten to a breaking point. And on top of that, you have an organization where it doesn't want to be just another organization. It wants to, in many ways, be the alternative to the IFBB, in that it wants to be transparent. It wants to create an organization in which athletes are paid fairly. Within the IFBB, if you are not one of the top dogs in the world and you're not winning contests, you're not making money. It is a sport where, behind the scenes, particularly for people starting out, there is an issue of like gay for pay and things like that, and people, rooming 5-6 people to a small apartment, and working out and really trying to reach that dream. And it is a sport where even if you're a top person, you're not necessarily getting a huge paycheck at the end of the day, even though your face and your name is being used to promote products all the time. You get some stuff from a sponsor. You get, aside from that, like you get for guest posings, but it's not really a whole lot for a professional athlete. What the big paychecks come to in bodybuilding is winning shows. And there's too much of a discrepancy there. You could funnel all this money, of your own money, into not just getting ready for a show, but physically going to a show, and maybe through your sponsor having enough funds to pay for your trip and pay for your hotel expenses and everything like that. And then let's say you place fourth and it's a smaller show, you might get $1,000 tops on some of these shows. Some of them, if you're not in the top 4 or 5, you don't get anything. And you can't really live like that. And it shows just this thing where if you're part of that boys club, if you're one of those top people, you stay at the top unless you really screw up, because you're getting all the funds, you're getting all the money, and it's not fair. There should be a system in place like most other sports. If you are in the NFL, you have a guaranteed paycheck even if your team is terrible that season, and you're not going to get as much as the stars, and that's reasonable, that makes sense. The better you are, you should get paid more. But if you're a professional athlete and you're performing at your best, you should get something, and you should have more power within an organization. You shouldn't feel that you can be bullied and you have to be a yes man to the people who pretty much own you. You should have more power over your own destiny, more control over your career, and the athletes themselves should have more of a say in how the organization is run, and there should be better judging. There should be more transparency in judging and in criteria, and it really should be brought to a point where politics plays as little of a role as possible. It will never go away 100%. That is not realistic, but it should play as little of a role as possible, and we should bring the sport out of this gargantuan, HGH gut mass monster feel back into the shape of 70s, 80s, 90s bodybuilding. And Kai's playing a very dangerous game, and he knows it. Kai is basically being, in a way, Lee Priest, really speaking out and fighting against the IFBB. And as you saw in the past, if you know anything about bodybuilding, Lee Priest, got kicked to the curb by the IFBB. And Kai, something like that might happen. And I really think he is going to go the route of this new bodybuilding organization. I think he will eventually be sort of a figurehead for that. And I think if they are able to get enough athletes like that, of that like mind, of that return to a classic physique, of fairness in judgment, of being an impartial jury, of being just judges that are doing their job correctly, I think it can be successful. And eventually, could it overtake the IFBB? I don't know. Perhaps they could both be in existence. I mean, the IFBB has so much power and so many athletes are unwilling to take the risk that it's going to take a long time to see what happens. But if we can get people like Dana Lynn Bailey in there, even big YouTube personalities, people like C.T. Fletcher, I think the social media aspect of it is really what's going to help this, because they have lots of really popular personalities that are going to fight against the IFBB, and that's where the power is going to come in. And I can certainly understand the anger some people have with Kai buying tickets and going out to the Olympia, especially if you came out particularly because you're a Kai fan, and suddenly knowing that he's not going to be there. But at the same time, there's really no other way he could have done it. This was the way to really get the message out there, to really show how he's continuing his dream, but in a different form. It's the only way where there could have been the correct message, enough press. It's really just the picket line. It's really the way of showing, I'm not backing down. They can't break me. They can't take my dream from me, even though they want to. And I think the press conference really, again, highlighted things where you have Bob Cigarello, who he started the press conference by damage controlling about the whole Kai situation and really trying to hide the fact that there is this new organization coming up, thinking of it as, well, it's nothing just because it isn't really anything yet. If you have a startup who's challenging the giant corporate structure that is out of touch with reality, it's going to take a while for that fight to seem like a realistic, worthy cause. And he was really making it seem like well, Kai just decided not to show up and he could have done it and, we didn't do anything bad. Even though that's a very oversimplified explanation of what happened. It was Kai's choice not to participate, but in a way, it wasn't his choice. You have a choice to go and, punch someone in the face, but do you do it? You have the option, but you don't do it because there are lots of reasons why you shouldn't. And obviously, it's a totally different, situation, but it just goes to show that just because you have a choice doesn't mean you actually have a choice. Just because an avenue seems possible, it doesn't mean it really is. Then Bob, he then started with the questioning, and he started to try and turn the press conference into a bit of a Kai Greene roast, just because he's always trying to ham up things and trying to put on a show, and he very obviously does not like Kai Greene. He's very adamantly against Lee Priest. He doesn't like people that are against the status quo. He really epitomizes that I pick things up, put them down type picture of a bodybuilder. The kind of guy that you expect to be in just like a big buff sorority douche who has no interest in education, is an idiot, and is nothing but his muscles. And most athletes of that caliber are not that. Most people who make it to the point where they're competing in the Olympia, you can't be that. You cannot be an unintelligent person and become one of the greatest athletes in the world. You can't. That's not possible. It doesn't matter. You can have great genetics, you can have a great trainer, but you won't get to that top spot. So I really think he is a horrible person to be, in a way, a voice of a sport during a lot of the big events as the announcer. He's a good example of what is wrong with the IFBB rather than what is right. He's an example of what people are fighting against. But thankfully, during his attempts to turn things into a roast of Kai Greene, the athletes have a lot more class than that trash in a bad suit and pushed the issue aside and really just said, you know what, he's not here. It was his choice, but then he's not part of this. And put the focus back on us. Don't put the focus, on the story. And Bob multiple times tried to talk about like how we have a great story this year, and they're trying to talk about the story of all the different athletes and he was trying to show the way the IFBB is, where it's more about the image you create, the image they can sell and make money off of, rather than the actual quality of the athlete that shows up on that day. There were a few highlights from the press conference. I won't go through the entire thing. The video's long enough already. But Dexter Jackson, I like to point out, because I have a lot of respect for Dexter, and he is, as far as his physique, one of my favorite bodybuilders. He is a wonderful athlete. It's amazing at his age he can be in that great shape and really ready to go. And I feel like he's someone who's been, he's a good representation of what else is going on in the IFBB, because he does bring one of the best physiques to the stage every year. But ever since 2009, 2010, post his Olympia win, he's slowly been sliding down the scale a little bit and getting overlooked. And I think it's really shows how it's because he's old news, because he's not a new face, because he's not quite as in the story, he's not quite as marketable. He isn't someone you can push as being a great rivalry through the year. He gets overlooked a little bit because, again, he's old news in a way, even though he's still one of the best guys. But he went out of his way to mention how dedicated and loyal he is to the IFBB, and that it'll be around forever because we run this show. And it was a very weakly cloaked attack at this new organization in Kai Greene, and I was a little bit surprised by that. But it shows, I think, how a lot of these athletes, how they are mistreated and underpaid, and they're part of an organization that is corrupt. But at the same time, it's very dangerous to do what anyone who leaves the IFBB or fights against it does. Just look at Lee Priest. It's a situation where, biting the hand that feeds you, you're going to get hurt, and it's taking the harder path, and not everyone's going to be willing to do that. Not everyone is going to see that it's worth, pulling away from what has been your livelihood and trying something new. Some people are going to think it's just going to be safer to stay through the status quo. And Phil then made it a point while he was talking he was Phil. I mean, while he was talking, he made it sound like half of what he was saying came off an IFBB loyalty oath. I mean, Phil was Phil. He was very, very careful with his words, but very much just this very pro IFBB puppet guy, and that's what we expect. That's what he's going to be. Another interesting one, last one here, was Cedric McMillan, who was, of course, robbed at the hands of Branch Warren, the Toad. He was particularly interesting as he talked about classic bodybuilding physiques and symmetry and the peak of the sport in the late 80s through 90s. And he's definitely someone who I feel is a class act that is the perfect example of the type of bodybuilder that is overlooked because of the messed up judging of the corrupt IFBB, something where he's someone who I think would be perfect to leave and go towards this new organization, but who knows if he'll do that. His career is, I think, in a lot of ways finally taking off and finally building up steam, so we'll see what happens there. It should be really interesting to see what happens in the coming months. I'm going to wait to talk more about what's happening behind the scenes until a later date because the Inspire Physique Championship, the amateur pro league that is being started here, is something that's going to be talked about more after the Olympia, and it's going to be officially announced and started in November, and things are really going to come together. We're going to see who is actually involved with it, what athletes are involved with it, what other, if any other, judges are part of it, who's going to be joining Lee Thompson. We don't know that much yet, so I'm going to wait and talk more about that at a later date. The only other coverage I'm going to do, like I said, I'm not quite as excited for this Olympia because I was already getting kind of sick of what was happening to the sport, and the only thing that was really keeping me watching the Olympia specifically was Kai Greene. And since he's out of it, I still definitely have an interest because there are other athletes that I like, and I do still have an interest in the sport itself. And it was a message that Kai said in his message was, take away from my videos that the IFBB in itself is not representative of what the sport is, of what it should be. So trying to find a way to, support the sport and watch the athletes and really appreciate what they're doing in the face of what's happening. So I'm going to definitely watch and analyze prejudging in the finals, but I don't think I'll watch it live this year like I usually do. I mean, I have to stay up really late where I live to watch it live, and don't think it's worth this year staying up till 2, 3 in the morning. I'm going to watch them, coverage the next day and rewatch some videos. So later this weekend, beginning next week, I'll do a little bit more Olympia stuff, but that's about it for now, and thank you for watching.